right, good evening, everyone. Again, I went to start the live stream, and it's like, hey, you need to reconnect to your Rumble channel. It does that crap to me all the time. But before we get into any conversations, let me start the recording, and then we will proceed with a Liberty Talk.
The Constitution isn't just a document. It's a blueprint for freedom. We're breaking down politics at every level, exposing government overreach, and going where the mainstream media surely won't. Join us in defending individual rights against the bureaucratic tide. You're listening to the Missouri Liberty Report.
All right, folks, and we're back with another edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. Again, to those of you who watch on Facebook, YouTube, or Rumble, we greatly appreciate your continued viewership. And if you listen on any of the podcasting apps or at molibertyradio.us, we greatly appreciate your continued support and listenership. All right, on tonight's show is the 2024 nominee for vice president out of the Libertarian Party, Mike Tremont. Now, if any of you have been watching the show for any period of time, I did have Mr. Tremont on when he was actually running for, he was looking for the nomination for president in 2024, and he came on and joined me for an hour or so, and we had a good conversation. Mike's looking to do a little something different this time around in 2028. Something that's kind of unprecedented. We don't see this much. Well, we don't ever see it really, but I'll let him go into further detail on that. But it's something interesting to discuss because it's, again, a fresh idea. So first of all, Mr. Tremont, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much. It's great to be in Missouri. And I feel as though I am in Missouri. Maybe I am in Missouri. I don't know what the legal status is on these things, but based on this show, if I were to sue someone right now, could I get standing in a Missouri court? I think maybe. I don't know.
I bet you probably could, just as long as it's not me or Brandon, because I have no money.
Am I subject to the laws thereof?
As long as you don't sue me or Brandon, I'm a poor man. Please don't do that.
You guys would have to do something wrong, and I'm told that you never have. So, that doesn't make any sense.
You must have been talking to my alibi. I appreciate that.
All right. So, Mr. Tremont, if again, just to refresh everyone's memories, a little bit of your background, and we'll get into the meat of the subject material here.
I don't know if that's a good idea. This could be the worst 90 seconds of the day for your audience. I will make this fast. If anyone, I promise to make this about 90 seconds. So if anyone wants to either go to the bathroom or grab a sandwich or something and skip this part, this is not terribly interesting. I'm a long-term Republican, oddly enough. I grew up sort of a fiscal conservative, worked for the White House in 1991. Spent 1992 on the staff of the re-election campaign for George Herbert Walker Bush and Dan Quayle. We lost, by the way. We lost. I don't know if anyone remembers 1992. Ask your parents. We lost. And I spent a lot of the 90s doing a few things for Republicans and worked in the financial services, public policy in Washington for a long time. Had my own business in the sector of education with financial services executives, taught economics at a couple universities, changed careers. When I was 49, I was in the police academy. I was on the road as a cop for 11 and a half years in South Broward County, Florida, which is a great place to be a cop, by the way. And being in your 50s as a cop, I worked from age 49 to 60. Being a cop in your 50s is a good idea. If you're physically young, then that's important. It's sort of a young man's game. I was getting a little long in the tooth at 60. This is just a few years ago, and left it. And that's when I met you guys. If I had known that all I had to do was quit being a cop and I would eventually meet you guys, I would have quit even sooner, I'm sure. It was a big reward for all my hard work in the Libertarian Party. I was in the Libertarian Party for about 14 years. Around the time I became a cop, I joined the Libertarian Party and worked with the Libertarian group in Broward County. It was, I do believe, I used to say this almost tongue in cheek, but after lying about it for so long, I actually think it's true. I think the Broward County Libertarian group in those days was the best Libertarian group I'd ever seen. We used to be able to, we once put something like 55 people in a room in a meeting. We would regularly put 20 people in a room, and we would raise money. We'd go out and wave signs, right? COVID days, vaccines to yourself, shoot this, all kinds of very fun signs on the beach. Had a great time, supported candidates, met with Republicans, met with Democrats. And now I'm back in the Republican Party, joined the Republican Liberty Caucus. A team of 45 people and I joined the Republican Liberty Caucus together. And I've spent a lot of energy recruiting for the caucus, which has been a lot of fun. I spent a lot of time going to, for example, Republican county meetings in Virginia, where I live. I live out in the middle of nowhere in Virginia, and enjoy going to county meetings and waving the RLC flag. The RLC being the old Ron Paul chaired group back in the day, way back, right?
Yeah.
In the way back. That's going back even by my standards. Okay. So I've enjoyed that. And now, running a campaign, which is largely unprecedented. No one has ever run for vice president in the Republican Party before, which in itself is a weird thing and suggests that it probably needs to be done.
Okay. Well, I have to ask you this, since you bring up the Liberty Caucus, and then we can get more into your VP campaign process that you want to get started here. I guess the question is this the time for the growth after the way people like Thomas Massey were treated in that primary, and the way Trump has just bashed everyone who doesn't want to go right along with the stupid agendas, endless wars, and horrible financial decisions and everything else that springs to mind, tariffs, all that stuff.
ICE violating the Fourth Amendment.
So, I mean, this seems like a really good time to try to build a caucus as we see the party kind of fracturing. And on that note, I heard something interesting today on the Jimmy Dore show. There was a gentleman on there. He runs Sonar 21, and I can't bring his name to mind right now. I think he used to work for an intelligence or something to that effect. He told me he spoke on the phone 2 weeks ago to Mike McCloskey. Now, if you don't know who that gentleman is, BLM riders were coming through his neighborhood. They broke the gates to enter this private neighborhood. He and his wife stood on the front lawn with firearms to say, don't do anything stupid on our yard. Now, I will add a quick caveat that his wife has horrible trigger discipline. She's holding up a pistol with her finger on the trigger. It's like, don't do that. Okay. But these people got run through the ringer because of
illegal.
Not
illegal. Unless you pointed at someone. But then the least of your problems is, being caught with your finger on the trigger. But okay.
And they were both pointing them in the air. Right.
Yeah.
So they got run through the ringer. They had charges brought against them. I think he lost his license to practice law. The charges and everything finally got thrown out. But he called this gentleman from Sonar 21 and told him that he helped Trump's campaign in 2016 in either Pennsylvania or Ohio. I cannot remember which state.
Mm-hmm.
And he called him 2 weeks ago and he said, I'm done with this guy over this whole Israel business and being there, doing whatever they want to as far as foreign policy. I'm done with the guy. So we're hearing this from people who were really Trumpian types for a long time. So this seems like the perfect time to build a Liberty Caucus and try to sway some people away from the MAGA stuff or whatever.
Yeah, it is the right time. Boy, there's a lot to unpack there. It is the right time to start the momentum. We're a little early to convert everybody in the Republican Party, but now is the right time to start the momentum because this administration, how do I say this politely? The president has surrounded himself with a bunch of dinglings. this is probably a family show to some extent. Let's go with dinglings. Okay. There are a number of people who help the president make bad decisions. And you can fault the president himself for some of these, at least in part. Maybe some of them more than just in part. And most of them a little bit. But let me suggest that it should probably be okay if the old man, your chief executive, says something like, if you're in the United States illegally, you got to go, right? We're going to follow the law. We're going to follow the law ruthlessly. That's going to mean a lot of deportations. It's going to be, a little unpopular. Barack Obama did a lot of this. We're going to do this. We're going to do even more. And I'm going to hold you guys accountable. And I'm going to be counting, right? That's how I'm going to hold you guys accountable. I'm going to pay attention to how many of these you do. Okay. That's the kind of thing that I don't think would surprise a lot of Americans if they knew that that's what the president had said to federal agents, right? Now, as libertarians, we might feel like the law should be different, but, having the chief law enforcement officer saying this is going to be his attitude probably wouldn't set your hair on fire, even if you were slightly disappointed by it. However, it is not okay for someone to say, well, the old man wants this done. We're going to get this done no matter what. And to hell with the Fourth Amendment. And we're going to shortchange training for the officers. And when we're caught between a rock and a hard place, we're going to pretend like someone tried to run us over with a car. That is not okay. And so this is why I say a whole bunch of stuff isn't necessarily the president's fault, but the administration as a whole definitely gives you the impression that the Constitution is in their way. And I think for a number of Republicans, you have to have noticed that, right? You can't not notice. Now, you can rationalize it away. Vice President Vance has said things like, I won't be able to quote him correctly, but the gist of what he has said a couple of times is something like, if you're complaining about, the most important thing is to honor the rights of people who shouldn't be here in the United States, then, you've given away what it is you really want to do. You're really anti-deportation. You don't want to follow the law. Something like this. But you can't not notice that there's been compromise to the Constitution. The best you can do is to argue that it's okay. Now, it's not okay with the three of us, but the best you can do, if you're going to stand up for every little thing, every dumb thing that the administration does, you would have to admit that you've given up on the Constitution in a number of cases. And I think that is one of the two big forces that is driving a whole lot of people to separate a little bit from the administration politically, at least in their heads, if not with their vote, and look possibly to something else. So I think, to your point, that's what makes it good timing, right? Because people notice these things. And the other big force that's moving some people away is that they see that the White House hasn't been very successful. There's an old saying, nothing succeeds like success. Well, I got to tell you, nothing fails like failure, right? And when your ratings are in the dumpster and interest rates are up and inflation is up, right? And you have a war going on that you're having a hard time winning, no hope in sight. That's almost no matter how you define failure, the administration is finding a way to serve it up to you. And for a lot of people in politics, the old saying is winning isn't the most important thing. It's the only thing. I'm afraid for my party, for the Republican Party, that there might not be a lot of winning going on in November. And that's going to mean a whole lot of consternation. And I think that'll be the other shoe to drop. There'll be a big push to correct the administration one way or another.
Brandon, you got questions? I know you got questions. Go ahead.
Well, I'll just a couple of comments to start on what he just said. You know, obviously, anyone who watches this show knows that we have great disdain for the president and the administration. I'm a very buck stops here kind of guy, because you gave Trump his first term, whatever. Second term, everything's you. Like I even was part of the crew giving him like in his first term, bad advisors. I was in that camp. That's all out the window. He is trash. And so, as a libertarian, still a libertarian, it's good to see multiple avenues of not chipping away, but like trying to break down that establishment grip hold that the Republican Party has. Because when you see like what happened to Thomas Massie in Kentucky, it's clear that wing of the party, the one we're fighting, libertarian wing of the Republican Party and Republican wing of the Libertarian Party, we're, fighting that fight together. And so I think that's positive. Couple quick anecdotes really quick though. I don't know if
I want you to get back to that. I don't want you to lose that thought, but let me jump in. I agree with you. The Massey thing was a big deal. In my view, that was a big deal because he was a congressman for whom we should have been fighting as opposed to fighting against him, right? I don't think that Trump wanted him out because he was a libertarian. And I don't think AIPAC wanted him out because he was a libertarian. AIPAC wanted him out because he wasn't sufficiently pro-Israel, right? And I mean, to state the obvious. And President Trump wanted him out because he wasn't sufficiently pro-Trump, right? He wouldn't kiss the president's butt, especially when it comes to the, Epstein files. And then there were a couple of votes he wouldn't support the president on. In other words, it was a little bit personal and a little bit about foreign policy, maybe a little bit about the Epstein files, but a whole lot of stuff that wasn't necessarily because he was a libertarian. And I think that's important because it makes me wonder, obviously we don't know, but it makes me wonder if it were a fight over libertarianism, I think Massey would have been fine, but it wasn't. I think a whole lot of Republicans are going to want to come home to our libertarian roots. The basic, fiscal conservatism, adherence to the Constitution, and free markets, and medical freedom, and less war. Those are the big five for me. I think most Republicans are going to be coming back to that stuff as opposed to some of the weirdness that the administration has been rallying.
I hope you're right, but the part that it's going to be about leaving behind the part of the Republican Party that refuses to acknowledge anything wrong Trump does. And even the part of the party that cheerleads on what he does, like the part of the wing that actually thinks that like bombing brown people, all brown people's good. And like that part needs to, if you can, it's the perfect distancing of that away. I think it'll draw more people in. The less of that is interested in like what you're doing. So
I agree with you. And the way politics changes in the United States, probably everywhere, is by replacing the people. Rarely do you change the minds of a group of politicians, right? To change things, you have to replace the politicians themselves. And I agree with you. I am hopeful that the people making some of these stupid decisions don't make them for racist reasons. In other words, given the opportunity, would they have pursued a war just as stupid if it weren't in the Middle East? And I'm afraid the answer might be yes. You know what I mean? To your point, we don't want people dropping bombs on other people because of the color of their skin, but maybe we need to set the bar a little bit higher. Can we not start stupid wars at all? And I worry about that. To your point, I also think whether you call it racism or just call it nationalism or dehumanization, I do think that in the United States, we don't, probably anywhere in the world, we don't talk enough about the death that we cause outside of our borders. How many Americans know that between the two wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, we killed over 1 million people? I don't think too many people know that. The number might be a little disputed, right? I'm not talking about it's exactly 800 or exactly 1.2 million. I don't know. Nobody, part of the sad thing is nobody knows exactly what the number is, but it's on the order of 1 million people. I think most people who look into this come to the conclusion that it's well over that. That's a tragedy of epic proportion. You don't have to be making commercials asking for foreign aid for children to be heartbroken by this. You ought to be able to be an old white male crusty neocon and still be upset about this, right? Can we have a little humanity in our heart? And we don't even talk about it. And I think that aligns with what your concern is, which is we make these decisions that just seem as though we don't care about what happens to other people.
Yeah. Well, another thing with what you were talking about with Thomas Massey too. So I like Israel to me, like, don't get me wrong. I talk about Israel and its lobby, not Israel, but the leaders in Israel, not the, whatever.
The Netanyahu administration.
Yeah. Yeah. And all that
Speaking
a lot
of
on this
villains.
show. But what I'm starting to realize more and more is that is just the biggest and most obvious lobby that shows them, like, it's a very clear, obvious example of like corrupting a politician's, vote with money, with, just with its influence. Yeah. But I'm hoping in a way that this will draw more people into the lobbying conversation in general. Just that it's like, it's legalized bribery. And when you see it, like, not that necessarily if there's like a pro-gun group that gives you money, like you don't have to be like immediately like bing, bang, boom, whatever. But if there's like 50 different entities in the healthcare industry that give a candidate money, it should be immediate, the same way it is with Israel and their lobby. You should be like, I can't vote for that guy because he takes he takes $1 million from the Israel lobby. It should be the same with the healthcare industry. It should be same with all of these industries. Like, if you see that level of bribery going to these campaigns, you should immediately think, I can't vote for you. And I hope that like the Israel lobby and its influence will wake people up to the lobbying in general. Cause I've been preaching for years that like more than term limits, because a lot of people like term limits. I'm like, if you could get rid of the lobbying or at least try to, expose it in a better way and make people not vote for politicians that take a lot of lobbyist money, I think you'd do a lot of good for the country.
You may be right. I don't know how to fashion that and still honor our commitment to the First Amendment, right? But you are right.
Yeah, I'll caveat by saying I don't necessarily think there should be laws against how much money someone can give someone. I think that you should.
Right, the disclosure should be enough. If we know.
Yes, I hope the people wake up to it more than I think that there needs to be like a legal shutdown. It should be like a very obvious, he takes lobbyist money, won't vote for it.
That's right. And I would draw a distinction between lobbying and financing campaigns. Lobbying is another function that often leads, especially used to lead to more corruption than it even does today. But this idea of these lobbies forming PACs and giving millions of dollars, in some cases dozens of millions of dollars, to specialty PACs to operate in just 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 districts. Obviously, we saw it in Massey's district, CD4 in Kentucky. And we saw it in the 4 districts in Illinois not so long ago, where it was sort of a split decision as to whether the amount of money that they were able to bring to bear turned out to be a good thing or a bad thing. It gets complicated. Thank goodness that people did see some of this and resented it. But I thought it was interesting, Brandon, to your point, I thought it was interesting that not everyone in Kentucky seemed to appreciate how much money the AIPAC and related organizations were bringing, right? As a lot of folks know, AIPAC has a separate arm that is their political action committee that's not called AIPAC, but a subsidiary political action committee. And then they give money to other PACs. So, if you wanted to know where the money is going and coming from, there's actually a little bit of trickiness to it. You got to, follow the flow chart. And I think that delays people becoming aware of it, and then it undermines people's understanding of the situation. So I think it's hard. I think we're still a couple of cycles away from your dream coming true of people being more aware. Well, that's just people being aware. Whether they do anything about it or not, maybe even more cycles in the future. But there has been a little bit of backlash against AIPAC in particular, and that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, I think here's a couple of ths that concern me, because clearly with in Kentucky, I think the biggest problem is, or seemed to be, energizing the youth vote, right? It was a lot of older Fox News people came out to vote. We have to get rid of Massey because he doesn't like Trump and he doesn't worship Daddy Trump.
Let's not pick on 60-year-old white male Republicans now.
Hey, I'm 7 years away from 60. I'm not quite a Republican.
We know some of these people. They're not all terrible, but go ahead.
No. But and then my other concern is, so energizing the youth to get them to have to bring up his name again, a kind of a Ron Paul revolution, right? So on bringing that about, and also you see the flip side of this, where you're seeing Democratic socialists winning primaries or races, and the Democrats are freaking out because they're like, holy smokes. And it's like, yes, we have two parties who consistently fail on their promises, who have brought us more inflation, more wars, more deficit spending, all these things where we feel it, and the politicians who enact these policies don't.
You don't get to act surprised when a wacko wing of your party starts winning primaries.
Yes. And so you're driving, and it's like, okay, the education, getting younger people to understand that, listen, freebies don't solve the problem either. It feels good, but you're not actually doing anyone any good. We need to get government out of things instead of placing more government in other places. So it's like a two-pronged problem, getting the youth engaged, but getting them to understand what the priorities actually should be and what a constitutional form of government. How much nicer it would be to have the liberty and the ability to make the choices you want without someone, without you violating some federal statute you didn't even know existed.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Point. I would be optimistic that in the future, more young people will want to come to libertarianism with a lowercase l, because of their distrust of government. To your point, I don't think you should be allowed to act surprised when the wackos take over your party, right? Now, in fairness, the DSA is not taking over the Democratic Party, but they have won several primaries, which is several more than I thought they would. You know, if you'd asked me a couple of years ago, would this group be able to win a single primary, I think I would have been fairly skeptical. You know, maybe one, but they've won a bunch. And they lost a few where they weren't embarrassed. You know, they did all right and they still lost. It's been several races. This is a pretty good sized group. And people have asked me, well, is the Republican Liberty Caucus analogous? You know, a fringe group inside the Republican Party? No. The analogy is MAGA. That was even bigger and more successful, and was a retaliation against the neocons who loved war, right? And President Trump campaigned on less war. People who didn't do a dang thing about controlling costs, whether those were coming from taxes or too much government intervention in your life. People who operated in an opaque fashion and had more reverence for these giant, weird government institutions rather than your liberty, people who ceded American authority to international organizations, all of that we hated. Too many Republicans supported that. And President Trump, before he was President Trump, Donald Trump, was the retaliation against that. And that's why he was so popular. I do believe that President Trump is the analogy, not a perfect analogy, but if you're looking for an analogy inside the Republican Party, I think it's Trump. And I think that the movement back toward the middle is probably not the right word, but back toward good policy, if I can just say that, in the Republican Party is going to be toward the Republican Liberty Caucus. I'm hopeful, of all the stupid things I'm going to say tonight, let this be the stupidest. I'm hopeful that the Democrats will also move in the same direction in the future. I don't know when. In my view, they're not even to the starting line in terms of figuring out what they've been doing wrong. But
they're actually still at home with their shoes tied together, running backwards.
It's
terrible. I mean, they're like, their buck against establishment is twice the size of government. And so, like, yeah.
They just don't understand that people don't trust the government. The other thing they don't understand is they continue to believe that the way that they need to market themselves is group by group by group by group, right? We need a set of policies for white people and for black people, for men, for women, for young, for old, for rich, for poor. Stop it, right? Stop it. If you would just honor our liberty as Americans instead of trying to break us up into little segments and run a particular ad for a particular American, you'd be so much better off. So I think the Democratic Party will get some mojo eventually. I don't know if that's in 2 years or 22. It's not in 2 years. Maybe in 10. I think we need a Democrat Liberty Caucus. You know, a group that would stand up for your rights, right? Your civil liberties. You know, a reincarnation of Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy that wanted to stand up for the little guy. You know, that's good democratic stuff, right? And not insult us either by wasting our money or treating us like we're a subgroup in your political polling. But they're not there yet. They're not there yet. But the Republican Party, I think, is going to come toward the Republican Liberty Caucus and toward libertarianism, which, after all, is traditional American politics, right? Traditional American politics is libertarianism. We haven't always called it that, but that is the truth of the matter.
The only pushback I'll have a little bit on that is that, like, I see the Democrat Party continuing. Like, I don't think the Democrat Party even has a stomach for like a liberty, because when you really want to break down what that means to them, it's going to mean less government. And like every single policy from the new Democrat Party, the Democrat Socialists, like I said a second ago, it's all more government. So they're going to need a total failure of their local and state governments to have any sort of recourse. So I think they're like 10 years away from considering a Democrat Liberty Party. And like, because in the same way, like you were saying, this is a response to, you know, the establishment, the new age establishment, which is Trump. And it's the new movement, like the Tea Party was before it got captured by MAGA. Yep. And so I hope, like it seems like the cycles for the right seem to move it more towards liberty, and the cycles for the left move it more towards like socialism. And it's true that they all start from the same building blocks of that. The politicians are corrupt and the businesses are corrupt. Like everyone across the aisle agrees from that. But we go, okay, we need less government so that the big business has less power. And they go, we need more power to control the business that owns the government. It's like,
it turns into Bernie Sanders, not Martin Luther King. I get it.
Right. But
no, you're absolutely right, which is why I said that my optimism is probably the stupidest thing I'll say all night.
So I'm
rooting for them. We all have Democratic friends, right? Yeah. And, you know, we're rooting for them. It just seems like an uphill battle.
Yeah. One question I do have for you. So you're going around to all of these Republican, meetings and all this stuff. You're talking with delegates about going and, voting for vice president. Like, as someone who runs a campaign for the Libertarian Party, I know all about pipe dreams and essentially running for the next election all the time.
Yep.
How far do you see it out? How many years out until the Republican Party is ready to embrace voting for the vice president separate from letting the president pick? Because I feel like right now, 99% of the public has no idea that that's even an option. So like, where's your timeline for like this? We're going to have this happen at this time.
2028.
Oh, that's optimistic. I'd love to hear the plan.
Okay, here it is. As you know, where do we start? As you know, this does not require a law change, much less a constitutional change. We're just talking about delegates taking matters into their own hands, demanding a floor vote and voting their conscience. Okay? Already, delegates are required to vote. We're just suggesting, and we're talking about the National Convention for the Republican Party and the National Convention for the Democratic Party. You know, speaking of the mirror image, Democrats, you listen up. You should be doing this too. You probably don't have a lot of Democrats listening to us tonight, do you? But, you know, pass it on. Pass it on. This is good advice for Democrats too. The delegates at the National Convention are required to vote. Legally speaking, they're required to vote. So they do. All we're suggesting is we turn that into a two-step process. Think and then vote instead of just voting. Don't skip the thinking part, okay? What we want them to do is to ask for a floor vote and be able to vote for multiple candidates, right? To get a floor vote requires 5 states to ask for a different candidate. That's a bit of an uphill climb. Which is why you suggested, you know, how many years is this going to take? It would take 5 states being pissed off about the way things are going. Or it would take 4 states to pretend like they were pissed off and 1 state to actually be pissed off. And what I mean by that is, if 1 state were pissed off, and by the way, the voting does take place by states, to ask for a floor vote instead of just a voice vote. Let me back up. Everyone knows what this looks like on TV, right? The chairman of the party goes to the podium and says, you know, our presidential nominee, John McCain, has, you know, picked Sarah Palin. All in favor of Sarah. Yeah, great. All opposed? Crickets, right? I don't even know what happens if you say I'm opposed. I think you probably drop through a hole in the floor of the convention center, right? Nobody really knows what happens to you. So it's not really it's legally a vote, but it's a voice vote. So it almost doesn't count. It counts for legalistic purposes only. Okay. To ask for a floor vote, you need 5 of the state's delegates to ask to be able to vote on a different candidate. Okay. What you need is 5 states to say, we don't want to go along with the existing process. That doesn't mean they have to be necessarily pissed off about the presidential nominee. It doesn't mean that they have to expect the presidential nominee to pick an idiot. It just means they need to indicate they would like an updated process. Now, even that seems like a bit of a stretch, maybe. But here's what I mean by 4 states need to at least pretend like they're being pissed off, and 1 state to actually be pissed off. Nobody wants to be the state that just goes along to get along when everyone is doing high fives for the state that actually steps up to the line. So, to make up a story, this is my favorite make-believe story. You ready for my favorite? Kids, this is make-believe, okay? This is me projecting 2 years in the future as an example of what could happen. Let's say, let's go with J.D. Vance, because I think he's the least offensive to most Republicans. J.D. Vance wins the primaries. He's going to be the presidential nominee. People catch wind that he's thinking about someone other than Marco Rubio for VP. 49 states don't give a rat's ass. 49 counties in Florida don't give a rat's ass. But Dade County explodes. They've been waiting for a badass neocon Cuban since 1959. Am I right?
I'm sure you're right. I'm sure the neocons in Dade County love Marco Rubio. That I guarantee.
More than love Marco. More than love. There are people in Dade County who would give their lives for him to be the vice presidential nominee. If they catch wind that their favorite son is not going to be the vice presidential nominee. There will be hell to pay. Now imagine if you're state number 15, you're whatever, you're Oregon, I don't know, pick some other state, right? And you hear Florida is considering asking for a floor vote. Florida is whispering, it's just a rumor. Florida is rumoring maybe a trial balloon to see how crazy their Dade County constituents are. Trial balloon. We're not sure we're going to go along with the usual process. We might ask for a floor vote. We're not sure that no matter who JD picks, maybe they start the rumor to pressure JD into picking Marco Rubio. All of a sudden, microphones go in the faces of GOP chairmen in states around America. Some young reporter sticks her microphone in the face of the Oregon GOP chair and says, Florida's thinking about not going along with the usual parade. They might ask for a floor vote. Apparently, they're really pissed. What do you think? It's going to be really hard to answer that question with nothing to see here. We're going to go along with whatever he says. Really? How do you say that into a microphone and then go back and tell your delegates, we don't care what you think? I just told the world that no matter what my delegation thinks, we're going along with whoever JD picks. That's a bad day. If you're someone who has to be elected by your delegates and you just told your delegates, go pound sand, I got this, you're going to have a problem getting reelected. All we need is one state to get pissed off enough to start a rumor. And once that rumor starts, all of the states are going to have to answer the question. Are you going to go along with whoever the whoever the presidential nominee picks for VP? Or are you actually going to do some thinking? Nobody wants to go in front of a press conference and say, yeah, we've decided we're not going to do any thinking. I think that this is going to be a hot topic in this late spring of 2028. 21 months from now, 21 months, Brandon and John are both going to think that Mike's an idiot. And you will be right, by the way. You will be correct. For 21 months, you will be correct. And then all of a sudden, in April, right? Once the primaries are, we get beyond Super Tuesday and whatever early March or something, and it becomes clear who the presidential nominee is going to be. Some state is going to get a little herky-jerky, and there's going to be a rumor started. And one of you two guys is going to say, dang, this is going to be on. There's going to be a food fight. And that's all we're looking for. All we're looking for is the democratic process. Doesn't have to be pretty. By the way, it doesn't have to be nasty either. If delegates indicate in advance, hey, you know what? We want a floor vote this year. And signal that to the presidential nominee. Maybe signal it before the presidential nominee is determined. That way, the presidential nominee doesn't have to get all bollocksed up and picking someone and having him rejected or having a floor vote on his favorite. He can just say, hey, let the delegates decide. We haven't had that situation since 1956. In 1956, the Democratic Party allowed the delegates to choose, and never since. But it was great press. They almost picked John Kennedy, who becomes president 4 years later. But the nominee, Adlai Stevenson, allowed the delegates to pick. They picked a guy named Estes Kefauver that no one remembers. But it was fun to watch at the time. No, I was not born yet. Thank you. I know that was on your mind. But it was a big deal at the time. And there's no reason that it has to get nasty. It might be competitive, but hell, that's good TV. competition makes good TV, but it doesn't have to get nasty. It would be very good for the Republican Party. Whichever party does this first will have a huge first mover competitive advantage. Nobody wants to be the party that says, no, we like the old-fashioned way of making up our own mind without asking anybody what they want.
Yeah, so we got a comment here from Porky Sparky on YouTube, if you want to throw that up, John, real quick. I kind of have to agree with this sentiment a little bit, to be honest with you, that like, I love the idea. I love the concept, but a little bit of pushback. I don't know if you know this, but the Libertarian Party has a very similar system to what you're describing when they pick their president and vice president. It's done at convention floor, voted on by delegates.
Is that true?
Yeah, I think so.
I have heard that the Libertarian Party does an excellent job of choosing VP nominees.
Sure. They do.
They do an excellent job.
I'm not disagreeing with you one bit there.
You know who told me that? Spike Cohen told me that the other day. He said the Libertarian Party does an excellent job of picking VP nominees. I said, right? I said, right.
Yeah. But my point being is that after that convention, I have never felt like I had felt an immediate just rip in half of the Libertarian Party. And I don't think either party, like, no one wants to be the guy who caused that. No one wants to be the guy who sees this always super unified convention. Because even if there's even during the primaries, if there's infighting, like they'll fight on the campaign trails, they'll make rumors. Like I remember there was a rumor that Reince Priebus in 2016 was just going to flat out bypass the votes, bypass all of that, and just hand the thing to Ted Cruz. And then as you see from the Democrats, Debbie Wasserman Schultz and her, basically the times two screwing of Bernie Sanders in 2016 and 2020, that even with all of that.
But by the way, can I just interject? It takes a true talent like Debbie to turn the good Vermonter into a sympathetic figure, right? When you're actually rooting for Bernie Sanders as a libertarian, Debbie has done some serious work.
And this is the crazy part. This is what floors me. She keeps winning re-election for U.S. representative, I'm pretty sure.
Dominated last week.
Yeah, she won a primary among Democrats after doing that. And she
dominated the primary.
Dominated. Yeah. So again, my initial reaction is that, I mean, again, I hope you're right. And I'm getting a gut feeling that you have a little bit more of a strategy to this than you want to necessarily lay out in public right now. And so I really do hope that what you're saying works, because I do I think having more people with a voice in the process than absolutely no one, or one person who picks, and then they're obviously the campaign staff of the president. I think that would be a good step forward for the Republican Party in a lot of ways. But I think the optics of it and being the person to lead the charge is going to be you're going to have a scenario where they're that upset about not even necessarily who the vice president thinks is going to be. I think it'd be more of an issue with one particular state doesn't like who the president's going to be. And so then they're going to want more of a say in the vice presidential. So they're going to be pushing for that kind of an angle. I think
that is a possibility. We're not going to talk about that. Speaking of strategies, we're not going to discuss. Brandon, we're not going to talk about that. Brandon. But there are any number of things that people could get upset about that could get expressed this way. Let me bring up a nicer one than the horrible example you brought up. Here's a nicer example, which is, in my view, you guys might disagree with this, but in my view, someone from the liberty movement, a libertarian, should be included on the GOP national ticket. Whether it's me or Thomas Massey, Rand Paul, or pick your favorite, there are a number, right? There should be someone from the liberty movement, a back to GOP basics kind of guy or gal on the national ticket. Someone who will stand up for free markets and less war at the same time, right? Walk and chew gum at the same time. That ought to be on the ticket. And if it's looking like it's not going that way, that might not be a bad thing for a couple of states to be upset about. It would not be a bad thing if, pick a relatively modestly sized state in terms of its delegation that, has a libertarian leaning, like say Wyoming, right? If Wyoming got pissed and said, who are all these nationalists representing our ticket? Can't we have a libertarian once in a while? And just to make a point, said, we want one of our mayors to be Kansas. We want one of our mayors. Oklahoma. We want one of our mayors. We want one of our favorite sons, one of our favorite daughters to at least have an opportunity to vote for him or her. You could imagine that taking place in a way that wouldn't be all that spiteful, right? So I think there are just so many different ways. My job is to explain to the delegates the power and the authority they already have. And that's what I'm going to do the next 21 months. Then there will come a day when they say, dang, now we know what Mike was talking about. Because now we're that guy who's irritated. Or we're that guy who doesn't like the way a certain rule has gone. Or we don't like the way the ticket formation has gone. Or we don't like the split in the party. We want to unify the party. That's when all of a sudden someone wakes up and says, who was that guy? What was that guy's name? Mike something, right? Yeah, Mike something. Didn't he give me a business card at some breakfast a couple of years ago? Yeah, look at my old jacket. Dig out that guy, right? And they call and I say, now you get it. Now you're calling me. Now you have finally put 2 and 2 together and gotten 4 instead of 3.5 like you have been the past 2 years. Brandon, the big reason, by the way, I agree with your implication that this is a good idea for democracy, right? We're just discussing how difficult it's going to be politically. One of the big reasons it's important as an idea for governance, and by this I don't mean party governance. I think it's hugely important for party governance. It'll help fundraising. It helps get grassroots involved. It's good TV. It's good for competitiveness. It makes your party look legitimate. It's a good thing for the party. But I think the more important issue in the long run is that it's good for national governance. It's good for the federal government. And by that, I mean, we need a more legitimate process for choosing our VPs. The way that we choose our VPs is stupid, right? Having one guy or one gal in Hillary Clinton's case, one person picks the VP nominee. One of these persons becomes vice president of the United States. Unless it is, Spike Cohen next time from the Libertarian Party. But most likely it's going to be one of these people that gets chosen by a grand total of one person. They immediately become mini-me, right? They immediately act as though they're a presidential appointee rather than the only other elected official in the federal government. That's the irony, is that they should be the most independent person in the entire government. They're the only person with his own political base, the only elected official besides the president, the only person the president cannot fire. And yet they behave as though they're a low-level Schedule C appointee. If you believe in checks and balances, if you believe that the concentration of power is not a good idea, you've got to believe that a more legitimate and a more potentially independently minded VP is a good idea. That doesn't mean whoever the VP is needs to go around being a jerk every week. But let me pick on J.D. Vance for a moment. There are probably a lot of people in your audience who are not big J.D. fans. But I'm guessing that there might be a few people in your audience who are. And to those people, I would say, try to remember the old J.D. Vance. The anti-war guy, the guy who was skeptical of big institutions, the guy who was skeptical of neoconservative, stupid foreign policy. Where did that guy go? What happened? We miss that guy. If you're a J.D. Vance fan, imagine how much more J.D. Vance you would be getting today if the entire party had picked him in a delegate referendum rather than just being appointed by one person. Because he acts as though he's politically beholden to a grand total of one person. Imagine if he had the whole party behind him and the expectation were that he would be accountable to the party rather than merely accountable to the president. If that were the expectation, if that was the press, the media's attitude, right, was, why are you not more accountable to the party? The whole party chose you. You need to stick with the platform that got you here rather than just regurgitating what the president says. You would be getting more J.D. Vance today. You'd be getting the old J.D. Vance. And that would be, I would argue, a very good thing. So this isn't necessarily about getting different people. To a certain extent, it's about getting a little bit of independence where once in a blue moon, it wouldn't be a bad idea.
I will say I'm not trying to harp on the concept at all, but with this particular example, it seems like in this time, like because of Trump's influence with the Republican voters, that you don't go against Trump, not because like you're like, I understand what you're saying, but I think in this particular time, like maybe once Donald Trump leaves politics,
which is when?
After 2028.
2028 is going to be the time, Brandon.
No, but he'll still be in office and he'll still be
be in office, but he won't be the presidential nominee.
Sure, but his
whoever the presidential nominee is not going to be able to demand the same deference that Donald Trump used to.
Sure, but I think Donald Trump will still make the deference. And so I think that like part of the reason J.D. Vance won't go against Trump right now is not because he feels like he can't, but just because he feels like the Republicans will turn on him the way Trump will. And so,
yeah, I think you're absolutely correct about that. My point is that wouldn't be the case if the Republican Party as a whole had chosen Vance.
Oh, I see. I think even if the whole Republican Party, like even if they would have nominated him as a delegation, it would have been because Trump told them to, not because that the voters themselves don't have their own agency in per se. No, but they're you know, as Porky Sparky said, they're cultists already. Yeah, like they willingly will do what Trump says. And so
you're absolutely right. That could happen. But first of all, 2028 is going to be different because it won't be Donald Trump. But secondly, and you're, you know, maybe we're talking about 2032. I think we're talking about 2028. But to your point, just because of the Trump effect, you could be looking at 2032 instead. But to your point, what if the presidential nominee and Trump didn't agree on who the VP should be?
Yeah.
I want to raise something here real quick because this is bringing to mind something that happened 2024 here in Missouri. Some of the Republican, like the county Republican committees, they thought that it would be a good idea, and I didn't disagree with them. They said, we want to start better vetting the candidates here that run for state office. So state rep, senator, whatever. We want to vet these people. We want to make sure they actually understand. Maybe they're a little more constitutional. Maybe they don't think that government's the answer, you know, running. I think Clint Russell said it best, running like Ron Paul, but governing like John McCain. And the Republican Party told them, if you do this, we'll sue you. We won't allow you to vet your candidates. If they go and they don't, you know, they pay the money to run for office, that's it. You're done. And you will not vet these people. Now, we did have a Libertarian candidate that ran 2020 for state Senate. And what he ended up doing is he traveled around his area to the different Republican meetings and told people, hey, guess what? You don't have to do. Just because they have the money and they want to run in your district, you don't have to take their money. You can tell them no and send them packing. You don't have to vet them at all. If you know they suck, send them packing. Don't take their money. And that was his big thing. Like, these people think they just have to let everybody and their brother in to run. He's like, no, you don't. You have that power as this, this county committee to say, no, buddy, sorry. We don't want you. We know what type of person you are. You're going to be just like the 90% of the other rhinos that we already have. You're not welcome. Yeah. And there has been some attempts at the grassroots to take hold of running the state Republican Party. There's been a rift there. Some people want it one way, other people want it another way. It's things like rule changes and all these different types of things. I think at the end of the day, I think all three of us can agree on, no matter what the plan is, getting people. I'll just speak for the state of Missouri. We have Tom Martz, who comes on the first Tuesday of every month and talks state constitution with us. And if people would just understand government's role a little better, we could solve a lot of problems. We don't, and not expecting government, instead of like, we're going to fix this, instead of fixing it the Democrat way, we're going to fix it the Republican way. Well, the Republican way in the state of Missouri has been pretty awful most times. So it's trying to get people to grasp what government constraints actually are, the way it should behave, not act like a for-profit corporation, but a government representative of the people. And then the grassroots, like, really getting a hold and saying, we're tired of the candidates that run. We're tired of the party itself threatening us because we simply want to behave like whole-brained adults and like really figure out who these people are, which to me does not sound like an insane idea, but the Republicans right. got very upset. And so there's that's the problem. But I will add this, right? I will add this. I think just because I have a petty part of my brain, I think most of us do, nothing would please me more than for one particular county in a state to upset the apple cart a little bit. Whether it really changes anything or not, I think it would help if it could happen. It upsets the apple cart. There is some media attention, and the conversation at least gets sparked. If we don't ever spark the conversation, if we don't ever upset the apple cart, then what do we get? We get the same elitist BS that they're lying through their teeth and like, we're not gonna bomb any more people.
Structure from the top down.
Yes. Yeah. So it does have to start at the local level. I mean, a lot of times that's the best way to operate, local level up, right? So yeah, nothing would make me more than a bunch of culty Republicans getting very butthurt because someone dared question the system that they've just went with for the last 60 years, right? That you flip it a little bit and you just poke and prod them a little bit just to get that reaction. I love it. I love it when the state of Missouri, the Republicans, Democrats go back and forth and they can't pass a bill because 99% of them suck anyway. And I just enjoy the chaos.
There's something beautiful about that just for its own sake. And you're right. And we need to be careful that we don't fall into the trap of, gee, we love this idea just because they hate it, which is probably enough for the three of us, but probably shouldn't be enough to, raise money off of, right? Look, there's another story in Indiana. As you know, Indiana is a very, very Republican, very, very conservative state, except for Indianapolis, parts of Marion County. But it's very much a Republican state. Something analogous happened in 2024. The gubernatorial candidate came with his, Mike Braun, came with his lieutenant governor preferred nominee and presented her to the delegation at the convention. This is who I want to be my running mate. And the delegates effectively said no and picked someone else. Picked a guy named Micah Beckwith, who happens to be a fairly liberty-minded guy, by the way, perhaps not coincidentally. This has split Indiana into two camps. The vast majority of people immediately recognize the analogy. I went to the Indiana State GOP convention a couple of months ago and presented this idea, not with my name attached to it yet, but just presented the idea to the delegates there, right? This is an idea we're pushing. This is what we think ought to happen. This is how we think it ought to work. The vast majority of delegates immediately recognized the analogy to what they had done 2 years earlier at the state level and loved it, right? Because remember, this is really a story about empowering delegates. We're telling the delegates, you have the authority. You need to feel empowered, take matters into your own hands and vote your conscience. We're the ones that respect you. The people pushing this idea are the ones that respect you. Your leadership is the group that do not respect you. So they immediately warm to the idea. But interestingly, I would go so far as to say fascinatingly and surprisingly, a certain minority of the people there, I don't know, 15%, 10%, 20%, not a completely insignificant minority, hated the idea. And they hated the idea because they lost the vote 2 years earlier. In other words, they hated democracy inside their party because it didn't go their way. And I got to tell you, it's slightly embarrassing to stand in a convention hallway and have someone explain to you, oh, Mike, that's a terrible idea. Don't you know what happened 2 years ago? We had to have a floor vote, round after round, and then the governor didn't get his preferred candidate. Oh, it was awful. We can't have that at the national level. Okay, I'm guessing you voted for someone besides Micah Beckwith. Oh, yes, definitely. All right, that's just straight up authoritarianism. That's just straight up, dictatorship. I just don't like people voting because I didn't get my way. And I thought it was funny. But to your point, I think that there will be pushback from people who are losing control, right? There are people who like the way the system works now. Maybe they're in state leadership. Maybe they're in national leadership. It may be that the people in the presidential campaigns don't like this idea because they like the idea of calling the shots themselves.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. I did not know that. So I think that having that precedent set in a statewide Republican, I mean, like you said, analogous. I mean, it's a perfect 1-for-1 on exactly what, it would be what you're hoping to happen would be exactly what happened in Indiana.
That's right.
So it's not out of the realm of possibility, but I do.
No, it's not impossible.
No. And it's more likely, way more likely than I thought when this conversation started. Like,
you thought it was 1 in a billion, and now you realize it's only 1 in a million.
Yeah. It's actually like there's a pathway a lot closer than, I was realizing at the time. But I do got to ask you, if Thomas Massey and Joe Kent and Marjorie Taylor Greene all attempt to take over and are successful for the Libertarian Party, would you come back home?
No. I'll tell you why. And it's no disrespect to the party as it is now, and it's certainly no disrespect to those folks. How do I say this? Two thoughts. This is harder than it looks, right? Getting influence in American politics is harder than it looks. Doing something independent is harder than it looks. Look at everything that Bobby Kennedy and his campaign did. Bobby Kennedy was surrounded by a lot of really smart people. He was surrounded by some people with money, right? He had a VP who could spend dozens of millions of dollars. That's a lot of money. And still found it extremely challenging to gain ballot access. Indeed, I think in many states he was probably not going to make it. There are those who would argue with me about that, but it proved to be a real challenge. And he wasn't polling all that high when he pulled out. It's hard. And he was a Kennedy, right? Talking about a smart, good-looking guy with a great name. who hadn't been to jail yet. He had a lot going for him, right? And he proved it's hard. It's hard to do anything independent. The other thing I would suggest is I think that the Libertarian Party, as much as I love the Libertarian Party, is in some sense doomed. What I mean by that is not doomed like it's eventually going to fall off the edge of the world, but I think it is doomed to always be relegated to the third party in an insignificant way. Because in a two-party system, if you're the third party, you're naturally going to be the repository, the last home of people who aren't all that interested in politics. If you're conservative, if you're liberty-minded, and you want to change the world and want to change policy and get involved in the nitty-gritty of politics and get people elected, you got two choices. You got the Libertarian Party and you got the Republican Party. There's no other choice. Don't talk to me about the other sillier choices. But if you're doing this, right? You're trying to make up your mind. And, the three of us have had to decide this, and I've decided one way at one point and one way at another point. So, don't listen to me, right? But if you heavily weigh the value of actually getting things done, you're gonna join the Republican Party. And if you instead weigh very heavily the idea of being associated with a party that aligns with your principles most often, then maybe you're going to choose the Libertarian Party. We get this, right? We understand this. The problem is that therefore means that everyone who's a nincompoop but conservative or liberty-minded is going to end up where? Not everyone, but most people who don't understand politics, don't have an interest in actually getting anything done. Those people are going to wind up in the LP. Right?
No, I'm not even disagreeing with what you're saying.
No,
I'm just laughing at the concept of.
And that means that there's huge ballast. There's huge inertia. There are huge roadblocks. And sometimes that's just inertia, which is merely a pain in the ass. But sometimes that takes the form of actually working against you, because it's a bunch of people in many cases who are more interested in a political debate and dinner club than in a political party. They're not interested in doing the hard work, whether that's having a podcast or reaching out to people or making phone calls or waving flags on the corner, whatever it is. They're not interested in that. They're interested in making fun of other people in the party because they want to feel good about themselves. Those kind of people are naturally going to be attracted to the LP. That's a permanent feature. That is not something you get over quickly. And for this reason, I don't see the LP as likely to have more success for the next 50 years than it had in the first 50 years. Which is not to say zero, right? Got a lot done, raised a lot of awareness, made a big impact in some places. Spotty. But I don't see the next 50 years as becoming the third party, displacing the Republican Party, displacing the Democratic Party, having ballot access perennially and having people elected to the U.S. Senate, blah, 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 blah. That ain't going to happen. And so in a two-party system, which is structurally a two-party system, that's not a good thing, by the way, but it is what it is. Something that's structurally a two-party system, you can't be the third party. It means you're not in the game. So, and as frustrating as that is, that's how I see it.
Here's why I'm not arguing with what any of the points that you were making about what you were saying, but I think that if Thomas Massie decides to run for president, and then you've got Tucker Carlson promoting him, or Tucker runs for president, Thomas Massie VP, they're on Theo Vaughn, they're on Joe Rogan, you're talking about a Libertarian Party that would be, especially, and I'm not even like in this scenario, we're taking people from the Republican Liberty Caucus with us. Like in this dream scenario for a libertarian, we're taking a lot of the people that you're relying on to flip inside the Republican Party to not just be cronyism. And then not only that it's not that this party would have to win elections. It's not that it would have to be the dominant party that wins. It would just have to be big enough where everyone's thinking about you when you make policy. Like you can't, the libertarians don't have to win, but you just can't make them so mad they're going to vote completely one way or the other way. Every policy that the Republicans or Democrats that are still in office are making are going to be done with libertarian principles in the back of their mind. And so, that's what I'm also with you. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think Thomas Massey's going to run libertarian. I don't think, but I
don't think so either.
I can hope.
I agree with you structurally, but what you just described is the reality of the Republican Liberty Caucus.
Yeah, but it's about whether or not Thomas Massey wants to run under a banner that just kicked him out of his own district. It's about whether or not he actually wants to keep fighting with neocons or wants to own his own version of this. Which I see the appeal to it.
I agree. That's extremely well said. I think you just distilled it down to the reality of the decision. Either he wants to feel good about himself in a way that could only be achieved inside the Libertarian Party, or he actually wants to get in the fight. Those are his choices.
Well, no, but I'm saying that he was a Republican trying to be a Liberty Republican and got trounced out of his own district that he had for years. So I don't think that
liberty-minded Republican. He got trounced because he stood up to the Israel PAC and to President Trump.
Okay, well, yeah, sure. But if being a member of the Republican Party means you constantly have to kowtow to Israel, then
until
fine.
2028.
What?
Until 2028.
But you think in 2028 is when the Republican Party says you think 2028 they're done with Israel?
Yes.
I love it. I love that energy. I hope you're right.
I do see.
As a matter of fact, I'll go you one further. By 2028, you can record this and make fun of me if you want.
It's recording. Trust me.
Okay. No, I know, but you can make fun of me in the future. Just clip this out. I believe that by the time Super Tuesday comes in 2028, the Netanyahu administration itself will be fed up with the Republican Party.
Whoa. I don't know. You're gonna have to explain that one a little bit to me. We're getting close to the end, but you have plenty of time.
We're way past the end. We're so far into overtime. We're in game 2. Netanyahu is already frustrated with the political split in his own nation, right? His own electorate. He's already being threatened by plenty of politicians here in the United States with having funding pulled, which would be embarrassing. And the irony is that I don't think he needs the money all that bad. But the embarrassment of having the Americans pulling funding would be greater than the penalty of not having the money, right? Israel's a very wealthy nation. Their per capita GDP is like 3/4 of our own. It's a very wealthy nation. The whole idea that we're giving them foreign aid is stupid on so many levels. It's a bad investment, but it's also an unnecessary investment. So he's going to be fighting for something he doesn't need to avoid embarrassment. He's going to have to proactively shed the United States instead of having it look like he lost American support. And I think that that's coming relatively quickly. We'll see what happens after the midterms, but I'm just saying, I don't know that he should be in the position of counting on President Trump, and certainly not a President Vance, always supporting him no matter what stupid ideas pop into Netanyahu's head, right? One of Netanyahu's problems is that politically his objectives are far beyond what he talks about in public, right? He wants to take over Gaza. Not only does he not want a 2-state solution, he wants a 1-state solution that makes Gaza part of Israel. That's not something you can talk about out loud. especially if you are in some sense beholden to American foreign policy. He has to achieve some sense of independence, or else his own political base will view him as a failure when even Republicans get mad at him. He, a few weeks ago, said to members of his legislature and members of his cabinet that we need to strategically prepare for going without American money. And I don't think that what he painted it as a financial thing, but I don't think it's a financial thing. I think it's a political thing. I think he's fixing to dump us, as in, you can't break up with me. I am going to break up with you before you break up with me, because then I'll look bad in front of my friends. He's got to break up with us first. And I think that'll happen before 2028.
Here's John, you go.
Here's my thing. I will say this, that the only people right now seemingly trumpeting the cause of Israel are a lot of right-wing influencers and neocons. And the nice thing is, when you go out and you step away from mainstream media and you just get on social media, you get on outside podcast world, whatever, you can't find many podcasts to go, yeah, we have to keep this up. If you get away,
we've got people in the Republican Party who are my age and up, and that's about it.
Yeah. So and I love that. I love that every time
111, so there's not a lot of them.
Someone says something stupid on the internet and tries to stick up for Israel, they get ratioed to death. I mean, 1,000,000 to 1 people like, this guy smoked too much crack, please take his glass pipe away. Oh my God, he's had a stroke, whatever. Or you get the weird ones like Laura Loomer, who might have been a male and now is female. I don't know. She's a weirdo. But I'm just saying, in the realm, it's seemingly amongst people in this country that Israel, taking up for Israel 100% is not a popular stance right now. No, it's even fueling, and I think that's what's even fueling some of this DSA wins, is they're out there in front going, nope, we don't want nothing to do with this war.
I think you're right.
And
I
so
think you're right.
It's influencing some Republicans and on the left even, which I would have never, ever dreamed that Democrats would lose votes to DSA because of Israel, because even those people are like, listen, you come out here and talk a good game, but we still know AIPAC.
Are out ahead of the Republicans on this, I think.
Yes. So I can see that influence in the American culture, the people in general, is starting to wane.
Yeah, definitely.
I guess the measurement is, when does the opinion of the people and the people being fed up with never unending wars and basing our foreign policy on what another country wants, when does that finally kick in at the polling places during primary season?
I have the answer. You ready?
2028. Don't let me.
Exactly.
But here's the thing. Here's one thing, right? Our defense agencies, the Pentagon's like, hey, we can't give missiles to Ukraine right now. We're low on stock.
Yeah.
And it seems like Israel's just using us until we run out of stuff, and then we're like, we don't, and then they're like, oh, we got what we wanted. Southern Lebanon, they get all of Gaza. They're like, well, we got 2/3 of what we wanted. And now, and again, they just go, we don't need America anymore. After we're financially destitute.
What have you done for me lately? Right.
Yes. After we're financially destitute, after we weakened our own military to maybe ward off attack on our own home soil, if that would happen.
And by the way, after we have squandered our political capital, our soft power in the Middle East, and we're no longer as politically useful, no longer as useful in a diplomatic sense, it still would be hard, I think, for Israel to dump us today, but we're doing everything we can to make it easier for them, right? I mean, we have been a crappy partner lately, and
we can't beat Iran. They're probably mad because we just can't finish off Iran. We seemingly can't.
Well,
And
of course.
just,
I mean, the whole reason you wanted, the biggest reason, not the whole reason, the biggest reason you want to partner with the United States is because, the United States military can kick the ass of anyone it wants to. Oh, no, we just proved that we can't.
yeah.
That, you just won the girl because you're the biggest, toughest guy, and you go to punch some kid in the face and you break your hand. The girl dumps you.
Yeah, it is fascinating to watch this unfold. Again, my measurement is when the opinions of the majority of America finally ekes its way in and applies enough pressure to get people. Now, again, can I say that some of these people who are like, yeah, I'm cool, I'm done, we're done with Israel, does that mean I trust them not to go, we found another partner to start a new war with or whatever? I don't fully trust them. But if it affects
Israel
policy,
Israel?
Well, just saying, like, if they said we're done with Israel, we're not going to fund him anymore, it doesn't mean that down the road some of these people wouldn't say, "Oh yeah, we've decided that we're going to
we
partner
found a
with
new
this
proxy
nation
to wage war for us in the
Yeah.
Middle East or somewhere." Oh yeah. No, just because we modernize our relationship with Israel, and I'm a big pro-Israel guy. I love Israel. I've traveled to Israel. I love the people. I love the food. I've sent my kids to Israel. I just think the government's head is up its butt, and it does really bad things in the Middle East, and its policy
Yes.
toward Gaza is absolutely unconscionable. So, I would consider it a family member at whom I've been angry the past couple of decades. I'm not anti-Israel in a cultural sense, a lovely
Yeah, the
people.
government sucks. Their government
sucks. That is the
Okay.
right word.
Okay, so Mike, we got 3 minutes left. Any parting words for you? You got 3 minutes left to talk before we end the show.
3 minutes? No. I got 3 hours of material. You said this is 7 hours.
I'm pretty sure I did not.
This isn't a Lex Friedman. I gotta
got
feed
momentum.
the kid.
Can we record the next episode now? Can we pretend that it's May of 2028 and I was right about everything?
Yeah, dude, we'll do that. We'll do a whole episode where you were right.
And then we can do an episode in which I got everything wrong, and that maybe you'll be able to use that one. I don't know.
That's funny.
Well, look, you guys have been terrific. I don't need 3 minutes to say thank you. I'm not that grateful. No, I'm kidding. If I were to express my gratitude, it would take all 3 hours. It's great to be with you because you guys are a lot of fun. If anyone likes what they hear about the campaign, go to MikeTermott.com, which you'd have to spell correctly. It's got 2 A's in Termott. Go to MikeTermott.com. You can learn about the Republican Liberty Caucus, learn a little bit about the campaign, reach out. You can sign up for our periodic newsletter, which isn't very often, I'm embarrassed to say. If you hate everything you've heard, email me. Don't sign up for the newsletter. You'll just drive yourself crazy, right? But email me at mike@miketermott.com and let me know just exactly how stupid I am and everything I got wrong, and we can at least talk about it civilly, and maybe I'll learn something. I will be in Dallas for the convention, September 9 and 10. If you're going to be a delegate, let me know. We have a breakfast, by the way, September 10 for delegate. Free breakfast. It's priced right. It keeps selling out, and we keep increasing the number of tickets available on Eventbrite. So now it certainly feels like I'm buying breakfast for every delegate in Dallas. It's starting to be expensive. But the Mexican restaurant, yes, we're having breakfast at a Mexican restaurant. The restaurant only has a certain capacity. So at some point, they're going to cut us off and say, no, you people are a fire hazard. We don't care how much money you have. So that's what's going on in Dallas. And that's a lot of fun. And we're reaching out to delegates and having those conversations. Most of them go pretty well. Not all of them, to your point, right? Not all of them. But we're just letting people know how we feel about things and getting ready for 2028. That's what the whole thing is about, is getting ready for 2028.
Well, Mike, I appreciate you coming on, and it's again, as we kind of jokingly said before the show, we're not used to guests reaching out to us wanting to come on here, so we appreciate you joining us and talking about this. It's been a very interesting conversation. Best of luck to you in the future. And with that, folks, that's going to do it for this edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. Be back with us next Tuesday evening at 6:30 p.m. where we'll have our very own Tom Martz on the show and all things state, Missouri State Constitution. And God knows what else we'll talk about, because when Tom's on here, this conversation could branch out 40 different ways. Were you going to say something real quick, Brandon?
Catherine Dreyer should be joining us.
Yes,
next
and Catherine
week
Dreyer will also be on to talk about an event that's going to be held in St. Charles. So with that, we bid you adieu, and we'll see you right back here next Tuesday evening for another edition of the Missouri Liberty Report.